In the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at creating buttons in Flash. Let's create a new Flash file, and it'll be an ActionScript3 file, and save it as ButtonBasics in your folder. And let's go on. Now, before we start talking about making buttons, we should really talk about what makes a button a button. Now, buttons typically have some sort of action that they're going to be taking, so it's very important that they look like something that we can click on. Some of the indications that we have, or the elements of a button, of course, are the background, and how that background may look different than the other things around it. And then also any sort of icon that we might have, and any sort of text that we might have. The text is usually going to be the action of what that button does, and that's very important that we have a very defined label for the button so we know what is going to happen when we click on it. Now, using icons alone sometimes happens with buttons as well. We just have to make sure that those icons are very recognizable and we can understand just by looking at them what they're going to do. Now, looking at some different buttons, there's lots of different styles and lots of different shapes that you can have for buttons. And they pretty much all have the same elements, of course. Those that have text alone, we should be able to tell what that text is going to do. Star is not going to be a very good name for a button because that doesn't really tell us anything. If we have an icon by itself, then of course we need that icon, such as this one, which is pretty recognizable for fast forward. Or play in fast forward, we want to make sure that that icon is recognizable. Anyway, there's lots of different visual styles for buttons. I like this particular screen because if you squint at it, you'll notice some buttons are easy to read and some of them aren't. And so that's one thing that you really want, and that is for your buttons to have enough contrast that you can read what they say. And you'll notice that this one especially, button number 9, it's very difficult to read. So same with button 19 compared to button 4 and button 14 beside them. So really look at legibility of your buttons and make sure that they're quite good. There's lots of different visual style for the backgrounds of buttons. You'll find that you can find examples all over the internet, but one of the things to be aware of is that there's actually a style which is pretty common out there called the Web 2.0 style. And this style has lots of tutorials out there for Photoshop and every other application. But there are some things that you find in common with this style. Rounded corners is quite common with this style. Also, subtle use of gradients and possibly a reflective type look are also very common. You'll also find just with the way that icons and text are merged together on a button also helps you identify it as a Web 2.0 style. Now, there are lots of different places where you can find buttons that you can play with. This is also a super awesome button, which is Web 2.0 style with the rounded corners as well as the text and some use of icon. Even though it might be on a different side than the icon and text on these buttons, they still kind of have the same elements. Now, you can also find buttons that have more to them than just that. Sometimes they have icons that break outside of the button itself. Sometimes they have stacked text, and these can, of course, create more exciting looks for your buttons. Now, when it comes to learning about buttons, you can find out more about them on the DME program website, and I wanted to point out that this is going to be our resource for the tutorials that we do. Now, buttons have different states, and those states are very, very important. The states are what the button looks like normally, what the button looks like when we hover over it, what the button looks like when we click on it, and then there's another state in Flash which is the area which is used as the rollover, and I'll show you that in a minute. So even with a website like this, we know that we have text that looks different, and that might be a link. If I hover over it, my cursor changes to a hand, but also that text changes visually. So that is my indication that that is a clickable item. An icon such as this, the Facebook logo on the left-hand side, I also notice that it changes, giving me a very clear indication that this is a clickable item. And that's what's known as state visualization. Now in Flash, we're going to create a sample button so that you can see some of the basic elements of these different states in Flash. Let's begin by creating some sort of rectangle shape. You could use a drawing object, it doesn't really matter for this, but I'm going to click and drag a basic rectangle, which is what you typically find with a button. Now, I've not given it the rounded corners, but that's okay. Now, the color that I'm choosing on the inside is something that is an aesthetic choice that you have to make. You have to weigh if you're going to be putting white text on it, or black text on it, or colored text on it, and how that's going to relate to the different styles of your regular and hover effects. So I'm going to choose this kind of darker green, and notice that this is about a little bit more than halfway down the whiteness to darkness level of that green. And so if I'm going to put a color on it, I'm more likely to put white than I am on black. That's just something to think about later. Now, in order to turn this into a symbol, we can do it a number of ways. We can right-click and choose Convert to Symbol. We can also click and drag this down to the library, which is becoming pretty common for me to do because I like it. Anyway, we need to select it, then drag it into the library, and we'll name this our sample button. And let's make sure that you change your symbol type to a button. As soon as I click OK, this has converted this to a button. If I double click on it, I'll go inside the timeline of that button and find that I have my 4 keyframes, up, over, down, and hit. Now, this will act like a button already. If I want to see that, I can go to Control, Test Movie, and see what that looks like. And you'll see I'm not getting a hover effect except for the icon changing to the hand tool. So what I really need is an up and over or a hover effect with the over keyframe. So we need to take this keyframe and duplicate it to the right. We can do that by holding down the Alt key when we drag that keyframe, or right click and choose Insert Keyframe. This creates a new keyframe, which is an exact copy of the last one. Now I can click off my shape, click back on it, and adjust the color somehow, maybe make it a little bit lighter. And you'll see I now have some sort of change. Now, whether or not you should stay with the same color or go to a different color on your hover effect is something that you want to be able to make up your own aesthetic choices on. But you'll see that we do now have some sort of hover effect. And I did that with Control Enter. Now we're going to repeat the process for our downstate. This time I'm going to click off my shape, click back on it, and change it to a pretty different color. Now, why would we use a downstate? A downstate is when the mouse is currently clicking on the button. And this is something that we might use when we have a button that reacts to us holding down the mouse on that button. So we need to make sure that we can visualize that our mouse is currently clicking on that button, and then we let go on that button. So that's why we might use the downstate. Now, the hit state is one of those weird states in Flash. What does it mean? It's actually the area that is used as the rollover, as the active area for the rollover. I'm going to illustrate this by moving the hit state down to below, way below this button. You'll see the up, over, and down are all in the same place, but my hit state is down at the bottom of my file. So let's do Control, Test Movie, and you'll now see that when I hover over what I see on screen, nothing happens. It won't do a hover effect until I hover over the area which is currently occupied by that hit state. So this means that you can separate the area which is active versus what you see. Now, that's usually not a good idea. In order to have a really good button, all we really need is up and over, because those are the two states that we really need in order to tell whether it's a button. So to remove the down and hit state, we can select those frames, right-click, and choose Remove Frames. Now, the last thing that we want to add to this button is some text. It's very common to create a new layer above your background layers so that you can have the same text item appear on both layers. So I'm going to click and drag and create a text item, and this will be my sample button. And I'm going to click on the black arrow, go to my properties, and change this to the font that I might like, the style that I might like, and the color that I think will work. I'm going to change it to white and put it on top of my button here. Now, by default, it's set to left aligned, and here's a trick to center a button. Go ahead and drag the end of your text item to be the same width as your button, and then change the paragraph settings to align center. Now you can use the up and down arrows to place your text right in the center of your button, which is really, really important. Now that I have that text on both layers, it's nice and consistent for the rollover, and I can go back to my scene 1 and test this movie again with Control Enter, and you'll see that I have a nice simple button using 2 states and text. And what we're going to do is save your file now. You can do File Save, and we're going to go on and create the 3 different types of buttons that we have in the tutorial on the DME website. And see you in the next tutorial.